Welcome to Inside New York's Art World. I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein, and tonight's guest is the distinguished painter Isabel Bishop, a New York painter for over 50 years whose traditional approach to figurative painting captures the mood and movement of the bustling city. Her work has continued without recess, even during the years when other figurative painters of her generation vanished beneath the tide of American abstraction. It is a very special pleasure to welcome you, Isabel Bishop. The New York Times recently announced plans to give Union Square a fresh image, something you have been doing for close to 44 years now. Can you give us some idea of the nature of your relationship with that very special location, Union Square?
Well, Union Square has meant since the very beginning of my effort to be an artist. It's meant my work home. I lived in my studio on 9 West 14 for 8 years, and that region became nourishment to me. It's partly the bustle of the streets, partly my closeness to it. That studio was on the second floor, and the big store windows looking out, and my nearness to Union Square, which seemed to me to be characterized by the multitudes of people, and that is the feeling that I had about it. The people were certain. It's true they had a certain character also. Now the square itself was occupied by professional hobos, mostly. At noon hour, shop girls and stenographers and so on, who lived, I'm sure, in the Bronx. It was a region of people coming and going, not residents, and that had a meaning to me too. But there were people who came there from somewhere to have their work life and possibly romances too. And all of that engaged my imagination for all these many, many years.
Why did you choose to restrict yourself to one location?
Well, as I say, that was an instinct to stay with something that happened to nourish me. You can't tell what would nourish you. I like other parts of the city. I go and look at, sometimes I go to 57th Street and 5th Avenue just to feel a entirely different world, and to feel the beauty of high-style clothes and a certain beauty of a person, long, thin girls, spectacular costumes. But they seem to me outward. They're not inward to me. But I love them. And apropos that, it has seemed to me all these years that the high style of, at least that's my word for it, in that part of the city, is perhaps only equal in the sense of a peculiar sense that I have of style by the bums in Union Square, because their clothes have been worn so long that there's a counterplay between the clothes and the person that makes for, if you draw those things and you really follow the form, makes a counterpoint. It's comparable to me to the beautifully designed clothes, which in another kind of way do the same thing in 5th Avenue, 57th Street.
Has the scene changed much in the 40 years since you first set up your studio and started to observe that traffic there?
It's changed so little, you'd be surprised. Just now, a good many buildings are boarded up. But until very recently, it had changed almost not at all. It's always very shabby. It's very shabby. But the denizens of the park have changed. They're younger, and they're hostile, and they're taking something or other that makes them behave in a fun way. They're not. I don't go and sketch in the park. No one does anymore.
Did you in time?
Oh yes, I felt myself at home there. I spend part of every day out there.
When you say every day, you mean that. You have such a keen sense of place and time and commitment to your work that you literally spend and have spent every day working. Is that correct?
Well, I do come down from where I live, which is far away.
It certainly is. You live in Riverdale, which is the most northernmost part, I guess, of the Bronx.
Near Yonkers.
And you commute every day, 7 days a week.
Yes, I do. Of course, when my family was, my husband has been dead for 17 years, and my son has grown up, and at that time, of course, I didn't come down on Sunday, so I did come down on Saturday.
You did then, too?
Yes, but now I come down on Sunday also.
Did you ever work at home as well?
Well, I worked at home a certain time, but it was necessary to do it.
Do you have a
But I never
studio
wanted
at home?
I never wanted to set up. I never set up a studio there.
You had the same studio for 43 years until a little more than a year ago. Why did you decide, after all that time, to change your view?
I didn't decide, but the people came from California, and they looking for a building on Union Square, and they fancied this little building, 4 stories high, and I was on the top floor and had a wonderful skylight and a wonderful view of the square where people walked all day long. But that's what they bought the building for. They left the other tenants alone, and they simply told me that they terminated my lease, which was almost up. And that was it, because they wanted to live there. They wanted to make an apartment and live there.
Did they do so?
Well, it doesn't look to me as though they have. So then, anyhow, I had to find a place. And I was so afraid of being homeless that I bought a Village Voice, which I was told came out on a Wednesday. Thursday morning, I read the ad, and the first thing that was offered I took.
But you were determined, of course,
Which was
to
on the
stay
square.
in
It
Union Square.
was half a block away from my old place.
Different views, though.
Entirely different. It's on the 11th floor. That doesn't see the street. And it may be very stimulating. I hope so.
A young person that I know who is intrigued by your work asked me if you ever worked from photographs.
No, I don't. Years and years ago, I had a brownie, and I photographed like mad, and I come across these once in a while, and they're really interesting to me now. Mostly of men standing on the street. I don't know, men's clothes. I think they're very hard to draw, and they're very fascinating. Again, in this counterplay, because a man's suit is made almost like an armor, and then his movements change that. But since that long time ago, which is probably 35 years ago, I haven't, because since then I've been interested in movement. Then I was interested in a genre point of view. I never can pronounce French, so anybody can understand it. So anyhow, I could spell it for you. I was interested in the particular. I had these bums come up and pose for me in my studio, and they sent each other.
How did you get them to your studio?
Well, the first time I was very frightened. I'd been in
Were
Europe.
they?
I'd been drawing in a park in Antwerp, Green Park in Antwerp. I'd been drawing. And the first time I'd drawn outdoors. This is towards the beginning of my art life. And I got so fascinated with them. Then when I came back, I saw how different they were in Union Square from the Green Park in Antwerp, and that fascinated me. They looked different. The pattern was different. There was a bum who was usually asleep. And so I observed him, and I drew him, and he woke up one day. And I got my courage together, and I said, he looked very foreign. He looked like an Egyptian or something. And I said, very slowly, I'm in the studio, wanted to draw him, and he said, do you want me to take my clothes off? So then, this little building I was in was being vacated gradually, and there was really nobody in the building but me. And so I got thinking this over to see this person coming. And so I fixed my easel at the farthest point from the door. But when he came in, he was scareder than I was, and he crept along that wall. But he posed for me for years.
What did he think of your interpretation of his?
Well, I didn't give him any. I didn't show him what I was doing or have any discussion with him about it. He was a very queer person, I think.
You originally came to New York to study commercial art.
Yes,
illustration.
I came from high school. I didn't go to college. And I came out of high school in Detroit, Michigan, to New York to study commercial art with the idea of being an illustrator. I hoped to be an illustrator. Then something happened to me.
How did you make that transition?
Well, what happened was that I heard about the modern French movements, which I had not heard about in New York. Now, you see, I came to New York in 1918, and the war was just over. In fact, the students went out in their smocks and marched on Fifth Avenue, and Armistice Day. So I know what the date was.
The day that you arrived?
No, but during that first time that I was there, that fall. And the Armory show had been in 1913, the time I was 11, and not in New York. But there seemed to, I think, have been so much focus on the war that when the war was over, the excitement about that movement being, that evidences of the French movement shown in New York, excited people again. And there was again excitement about the new Descending the Staircase and these things, were they art or were they violently non-art? And so all this opened the world. I had no more idea. In Detroit, I had thought of art, I think, in the museums or something, you learn how to make it look like that, and then you learned what was beautiful to paint, and you painted that. And it didn't seem interesting to me, and illustration seemed like something you might earn your living at. But this all excited me so. Then it became a problem of discovery, of intellectual pursuit, of possible invention, and original thoughts and everything. So I quit there. This was after 2 years, and went to the Art Students League, where things were seething. I mean, I went to study with Max Weber. He was in his Cubist period. Wow! And what I did, he thought was perfectly awful. He had a.
What did you think of what he did?
Oh, I thought it was all this great. Couldn't see one thing. I couldn't distinguish work from undistinguished. But it was all very. His work was very exciting. It didn't look at all like nature.
Was there a particular teacher to whose work you responded at that point, or especially influenced you?
Well, there was. Now, Weber, I couldn't get on with him at all. I mean, he thought my work was so awful. That's a little hard. He had a way of having the students line up their work on a Monday, and then he would, before the whole class, talk about it. This was done, and he pointed to mine. He said, "I come to this first because as a fireman goes to the worst spot in the fire first." Oh no! So I left. But now another teacher that I'd had you had a teacher half a day, and then you could choose. You could do anything you wanted in the league, choose any teacher at any time, and I chose Kenneth Hayes Miller, who had been in the Armory show. I wanted to have somebody who'd been in the Armory show.
Was his work considered radical at that point?
It was considered belonged to the day, I would say. He was classical, but not in an academic sense. He was a non-academic person, and he was exploring in his own way, which was different. And I found him an intellectually stimulating, fascinating person who presented all sorts of new possibilities and points of view. And I stayed with him. I did study with other people. I studied with Guy Payne Dubois, and I became a friend of his and was always influenced spiritually by him. And my great surprise, I found that Raphael Sawyer was influenced by him. I found that not only in reading Raphael's books. It was more, one was influenced by his point of view, I think, as much as by his painting, which I think is very beautiful and is underrated today.
At that same time, there were other students and teachers, including one who became a very close friend of yours. I'm thinking of Reginald Mark.
Oh, Reginald Mark. Well, he was really not he was in and out of the league. He was 4 years older than I. He graduated from Yale, where he was everything whatever their paper is called. He was the chief draftsman for it. And when he came out of Yale, he got a job on the Daily News, reviewing burlesque. He drew the burlesque, and then he rated it so many stars. And he did this and made an excellent living. But he floated around the league, and he became very, very fond and tremendous admirer of Kenneth Hayes Miller. And so, though he wasn't formally his student, he visited him in the studio, showed him it. He said at the end of his life, I showed Miller everything I did all of my artistic life. So, and I
What was
became
the
very
nature
fond of red.
of your professional association with Reginald Marsh? Did you share work and criticize each other's work as well?
Well, he was so beyond me, you know. Gracious. But all the same, we were friends and did look at he was kind enough to look at my work, and I always looked at his, certainly.
Not only did you look at
I
his
went
work,
to Coney Island with him, too.
I think you also went to the burlesque
I went to
with him.
burlesque with him, too.
Did you draw anything from...
I tried, but he took me backstage at Minsky's. There's nobody here old enough to remember who Minsky was.
Some of us do.
But anyhow, this is interesting. When I had a show recently at the Whitney, Minsky's grandson wrote to me and said, because I had said something about Minsky and Marsh, it's true, my grandfather was a great admirer of Marsh and owned some paintings by Marsh. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was nice to be backstage at Minsky's. I couldn't do anything with it as a draftsman.
When you were a student of the Art Students League, were there many other women that were there? And what was
the
it
first
like?
year when the women's life class and the men's was combined. You can see how long ago that was. Before they had women's, girls, one class, life class, nude, and men in the other. But my year was the first year when they combined them.
But that was not a surprise to you, since you had a
Wasn't
much
surprising.
earlier
Yes,
experience,
wasn't
but an
surprising.
unusual one.
Yes.
Can you tell us about
But when I was living in Detroit, Michigan, there was a very eccentric man who wore a green eyeshade, was a very special sort of person, who had an art class, which I went to on Saturday. And his theory was that nobody should do anything of the way of drawing except from life and from the nude. So I was 12 when I went. I'd never seen a nude person. I came in, here's this big fat woman sitting on the stand. You know, this is really unbelievable. But anyhow, I drew like everything there. But in fact, there was a few months after I left high school before I went to New York, and I drew every day there. And he was kind enough to encourage me.
You had your first exhibition in New York in 1932. The same gallery.
Same
you
gallery
still
now.
show.
Yes.
How did that first exhibition come about? How did one go about engaging a young painter, let alone a young woman painter, in 1932?
Well, this young man who founded the gallery, Alan Gruskin, had just got out of Harvard and he had no money. And it was a time when solid galleries were closing. In the depths of the Depression, he started a gallery on a shoestring in a dreadful place. It was on Fifth Avenue, but it was a railroad flat with dusty red carpets from one avenue to the other avenue. And anyhow, he got together about 15 or so young people, equally men, girls and boys, and charged $5 a month for you to hang something there in the group show. And then after time went by and he thought that you were ready, he would give you then a show in the front room, with the small front room with the red dusty carpet. And it was on the 7th floor. And when I finally did have a show, the elevator broke down, and it was in a very hot May. So that was
the
rather
critics treated your work very kindly, and early on, you were awarded many prizes.
Well, I don't remember it that way, but they were relatively kind of that I deserved, doubtless. Except that one very influential critic, this is the New York Times, he said, I've heard that some people like this person's work, but I can't see it. I'm unable. He said, it's so gray and so, I stand off and squint at it. I come near and I cannot see it. And that is a picture that does hang in the Metropolitan Museum and is occasionally like today.
You said that there is a measure that an artist must use to determine whether or not a work is successful. To begin with, you rework the same idea or theme in so many ways, in prints, in etchings, in drawings, in oil. How do you know when you have finished a work of art?
Well,
How do
I'm
you know when
afraid
it's
no one would ever consider them finished because I'm not. even willing, let alone able, to carry them to the point of physical finish. But I have to concede that they're done when they, what I call read right, that is, when they read back to me a statement.
When does an artist know, or when does the public know that an artist has succeeded in their work? By what measure?
Well, that I don't know.
Actually, we once did discuss that notion, and you said that when the viewer looks at that work, the artist succeeds in that work when when it will govern the questions that the onlooker asks of it.
Yes, well, I do think that, and I wonder, hope somebody would like to discuss that. It seems to me that artists govern the questions that will be asked.
That the artist governs the questions.
If his work succeeds, he has governed the question. Not that you can't ask the wrong question, but you don't feel like asking the wrong questions. For instance, you wouldn't ask a Raphael to move. You wouldn't ask that figure to move. It would be a totally wrong question to ask, and you wouldn't ask it. If you asked it, you thought you couldn't. Absolutely stopped it. Couldn't. And I was impressed by this one time when I was very struck by the immense power of a Poussin in that Metropolitan Museum of the Rape of the Sabine, in which a battle is going on over the Sabine. And this battle, I found this battle is going on. I mean, it was convincing. It wasn't just a description. In your nervous system, something happened by opposition of line, or you see, something was going on. But if you then ask the wrong question, and you say, here's a soldier, you say to him, move that arm, it'll break off. I mean, this is all empirical, and I can only convince you by photographs and slides or something, because you have to experience it. But in experiencing it, you do find something quite interesting, I think. And the artist, one thing that I think will be found, hopefully by critics, because they don't seem to see it, in this Victorian exhibition at Brooklyn. I think those artists who were great artists in their own day, I think you find that they, in most instances, are not able or do not have the concept of governing the questions. And so if you can...
Then what do you think of their results?
They're inconsistent. They have unsatisfying. Of course, the critics say these things are coming back, and I think they're coming back as camp and as exhibits of tremendous skill. But I think they'll never come back on the. I say they'll never come back on the level at which they went out of style, which was at the top. I mean, they were considered equal to Rembrandt, Titian, Veronese, everybody.
You say it's not a matter of liking them, because fundamentally...
No, and I'm leaving out their content, which we think is very, very sentimental. I'm leaving that out, putting it merely on formal terms, only in formal terms.
And in formal terms, they are fundamentally not good, by your view.
No, a fundamental cross-up and fallacy.
And what is that?
Well, it's so hard to explain. But it has to do with this matter of the Poussin and the arm raised, in that the Poussin, of course, was consistent and did govern the questions. I purposely asked the wrong question, but he governed it. He never would want to ask the wrong question of him. And perhaps through their sentimental content, which intrigues people, these artists I speak of, like Bouguereau and Leighton and people like that, you probably very likely wouldn't either, owing to your feelings about their content. But what they've done, I think, is in their skill, they've tried to take both possible forms. To go back a little, it seems to me, put it very simply, the two forms of painting in which everything finds a place. The two are that in one case you see the world as disparate, as separate, ordered forms, and in the other only as a continuity. And both have their terrific powers and both have their terrific limits. And to combine them results in something that is fallacious. And they combine them. They want everything, both the power of having that arm able to move and the power of having the terrifically strong design of Poussin. You can't have them both.
In addition to governing the question, you've asked yourself some very hard questions during the course of your career. There is a notion that you have found useful during all this long time that keeps on running through your mind. And I wonder if you might share it with us. You've said you don't know what to call it. Is it criterion? Is it test? Is it motto? Is it touchstone? But it is something that appears in your studio by a now anonymous woman. I wonder if you would tell us what the idea is and what its significance in your life and work is.
Well, I'll try. It may seem a little difficult. But the aphorism is, strict with the thought, unfearful of the form, so shall you find the way, and hold it fast. And I don't know, does it strike you? It doesn't, perhaps. But if you think of it, it seems odd that it shouldn't be equally valid the other way around. It sounds just as well to say...
Does it make good sense in reverse?
It sounds just as well to say strict with the form, unfearful of the thought. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It only works strict with the thought. Because the form always must be the outward shape of the content.
Is that not a view that you shared with Ben Shahn?
Yes, Ben Shahn wrote a series of lectures for Harvard, which he called the shape of content.
And that form itself was the shape of content.
Form was the shape of the meaning. It's the meaning. The meaning is the thing, and it has to have some shape. And the shape of the source is the form, but it only has the correct form if the form does express the meaning. But the meaning is the form. Now, when he wrote a book, he made these essays into a book that were given at Harvard, and it was translated into Japanese. And the Japanese called the book The Outside of the Inside. Oh, that's perfect.
On a subjective level, there is another test that you apply.
Yeah. Oh, and that is the most severe. Is it so?
What does that mean? Is
it so?
Is
it so? It means, is it psychologically so? Subjectively so? Because it can be realistic to the last degree. And you still, inside of yourself, you know it isn't so. It's made up. It's in something. But it's not so. And think of it. Rembrandt's been adored for so many centuries. Think of the number of people who model themselves on Rembrandt's etchings, paintings. They're not so. They're not so.
We talked before about style in the most superficial and everyday sense. But style in the most fundamental and aesthetic sense is a recurring theme in the content of your work and in your ideas. In terms of a consideration of style, it is obviously a way of preserving the world. Perhaps you might tell us a little more of this discontinuous notion that you have in terms of style.
No, this is interesting because I think we live in a period when we really the continuous, what I call a continuous form, is our form. It's even true in objects. The automobiles do this. Remember the old automobiles used to be this way, and then they had nose sticking out here, mud guards like this. And then gradually, over time, it's been a flow. But this isn't accidental, because I think it's true in clothes, it's true in decorative, in jewelry, it's true in belt buckles, it's true in everything, that we really feel the world. We seem to feel I believe we feel the world as a continuity. I had a feeling of enlightenment when I thought about Cubism. lately, the cubism, which looks edgy, it looks cut up, is really an example of the continuous style. It's the breaking up of the object in cubism, break up the distinction between an object and the world, so that they are not distinguishable, and you can't. They're broken up and put together so that the cubist form, which was I think an extremely important invention, not important in, it was very short-lived, really, in a pure didactic form, and I think this is part of the reason why it's so hard, so demanding, so extremely austere.
Do you think of Cubism as a Baroque style?
But I think that it connects, you see, to my surprise, I think it's true, and I could show you with slides, and I think I could convince you that if you look at a Fragonard, isn't it any more different from, or Delacroix, different from a Braque or a Picasso, or of course, of Rubens, you find that this continuity, if I could then oppose it with the other style, the discontinuous, the disparate, the style in which disparate elements are ordered. And that would be Raphael, Bellini, I think the whole classic Renaissance period.
Are there any artists at present using those
I think there
techniques?
are very, very few. In fact, the only ones that come to my mind are George Cukor and Richard Estes, who's a photorealist, but who orders his images in strictly, usually.
How do you respond to the work of the photorealist?
Well, I don't at all. I really do not, but except for Estes. Because I really think that they have not ordered the images. That they've taken the camera as the validity. Whereas the camera, you can use the camera all you want, no objection to that. But the validity has to be here, in my mind.
Why did you give up using the camera?
So I couldn't use it anymore because I was in motion. It doesn't help me in motion. It only helped me with details when I was just interested in a still figure.
Since the 1960s, some of the groups of strolling people that you were focused on are very young people, students. Is it the vitality and the dynamism of their emotion that especially engages you?
Well, yes, it is. And it also, these things, a good deal happen, Stan. You do with what you can get. And I found that at a point I could get, to pose for me, the young people who were graduate students at NYU who were, in other words, they were engaged in something in irregular hours. They were dance students, also many of them, and who could give me a couple of hours. And then, as I did use them, I got
it was serendipitous.
It was serendipitous. But they do have something in common in their role in life, their temporary role as aspiring young dancers, as students. At this moment in their life, they have they share a role, and that gave me a sense of a certain amount of point in using it.
Is the young person a particularly challenging subject?
Well, I think so now. I didn't earlier. I think so now, especially because I'm interested in walking, and they walk and walk for me.
Do you walk a great deal?
I walk a bit.
I picture you always in transit from Riverdale to
Union
Square.
I walk to the subway, and I walk to the bus.
Lately, your paintings represent an approach to abstraction that is more marked than any of your earlier work. Is that an accurate perception?
Well, it's not with any aim of abstraction, but it's only my effort to find a way, and I certainly haven't found it, of expressing walking without declaring the environment exactly, without saying anything about the place where they are walking. And this seems practically impossible, but I'm not going to talk about what I don't have anything to say about. And I have nothing to say about that. I really have nothing to say about it. Even though I like Union Square, there aren't any people. It isn't part of my idea, my concept inwardly that I want to say where. Exactly where.
In terms of what appears to me more abstractionist to me. It seems that the brushstrokes are more simplified and spontaneous. Do you attribute any of that to your interest in more modernist innovations?
No, and I've never thought of it that way, and I'm sorry they look that way, if they do. It's no part of my intention.
In terms of the current work, what is your intention?
Some way to make you feel what I feel.
What do you feel?
Well, I mean, that they are somewhere. I mean, that there is an ambience. And what comes out of it is that I cannot make them really material. That's one reason I can't produce any finishes, because if I can express the materiality, which I used to try to do very much, then the air must be equally material, and the environment must be equally material. And so I have to take away from the materiality of the figures in order to make this connection, this continuous form, which I struggle to get. I struggle to get using anything I can.
Some consider you a social realist painter. How would you describe your work?
Well, certainly not in those terms.
How would you?
Well,
do you think that
I don't know, somebody lately put it down on a program as they said she's a romantic realist. Oh, well, that's all right. But certainly not a social realist, because I really had I just had no interest in social causes, even in the depths of depression.
In spite of the fact that you were painting working men and women?
Well, I was saying working men and women, but I wasn't
Do you not think of that as a political statement?
No.
Willy-nilly?
No.
In spite of...
No, I don't, really. They were there. It was serendipitous. Really.
Do you think that a romantic realist would be an accurate description of your work?
Well, I guess I do.
What is a romantic realist? They sound slightly...
The romantic, I take, in a formal sense. I don't know how this person meant it. But to me, the romantic form is the continuous form, is the Baroque form. Formally, romantic means something to me. It means to me a particular kind of form. Not the discontinuous ordered form, but the continuous form.
Any advice that you would give to a young person who is starting out on a career today as a painter?
Advice? You advise us how to get their work shown?
No.
That seems to be the general concern.
Well, it probably is, and for good reason. But I think, too, that there is something much more fundamental, and that is the nature of the work and the commitment to the work.
Well, I have a very strong feeling that I think the work is, that the pursuit is important. I feel the pursuit is very important. Now, look, we have no image of man. You can say, so-and-so looks like an 18th century man. He looks like a Roman man. But we don't know what an American man of 1979, we don't have an image. But an artist, I feel, suppose they took the idea, suppose the next wave of students took the idea that with all their splendid discipline that many of them have now in the designing of the picture plane, understanding the central art form so they won't get mixed up like the Saint Laurent painters of Victorian times. If they took that discipline and went after image, I don't think this would be a voyage of discovery, because there isn't any. They'd have to make one, find one, by trying here and there and everywhere to find one. Well, now de Kooning, to my mind, and I'm an admirer of de Kooning, his most moving work is that series on women, which is frightening. He's like this, terribly. But they are searching for image. I think they're searching for image. And he would paint, over these things, over and over and over and over for years, the same pictures. And I think searching to get it out from inside an image. And that's where it would have to come from, by infinite trying and from the inside, but using this I think the students today have a very good formal equipment.
There's a phrase that is on your studio wall that has interested you for many years, I wondered if the phrase lingers, but if the idea lingers on, and that was, something that related, we work in the dark and we do what we can. Do you still feel that way about your work?
Oh, yes.
How does the phrase
We work
go?
in the dark. We do what we can, we give what we have. Our doubt is our passion, and our passion, our task. The rest is the madness about it. It's Henry James.
Is that a madness?
Yes.
Fine madness.
I think it's a madness.
When you create a painting, does the background for your paintings, for the figures, is it important that they're at Union Square?
No.
I mean, is it important that you don't have that view any longer?
Oh, yes, but not for the background, it's for the moving figures. You see, where my old studio was, it had windows on the square, only 4 stories high. I had a skylight in another part of the room, but a sort of partition between. So I didn't paint actually looking out that window, but I put my picture where I could see it from the part where I could look out, and I could verify it subjectively. I mean, subjectively, I'd know by looking out, no, that's no good. That doesn't say the right thing. It was a way of verifying all the time, and also it was like eating the nourishment of looking at those people. So in that part of the square, people don't just cross the street, but they go in many directions. So the feeling is always very ornate.
For many years, you were married to a distinguished neurologist. You lived in Riverdale. You had a husband, a son, a house. In spite of the fact that you painted every day, how do you compare your life and your work to other women artists, particularly of your period? Did you ever identify as a woman artist?
Well, I knew women artists who managed, they managed to say. Heavens, do you remember who Yasuo Kunyashi was? Yasuo Kunyashi's first wife, I knew when she was very young, when they were just married. And they lived in Brooklyn Heights. She did everything. She did it, and she was a meticulous housekeeper. She ran the Arsen's Lee lunchroom, painted some of the best pictures of her life, took her husband's work around to do it. Really, she did all that. She was a very distinguished artist. She just died recently.
Do you ever feel that your work was disadvantaged because you were a woman?
No. No, I was lucky because, you see, I thought that if I'd been a man, perhaps this relative who subsidized my whole studenthood and after.
Your relative who was the sponsor of your art education.
My father's first cousin came before. He did this, and I don't know that he would have for a son. And he's sort of interested in a young woman who would want to put that much into anything, as much time and effort. And I would have expected a boy to do that. He wouldn't have probably subsidized it.
You really thought of being an illustrator because it was a way to earn living.
Well, that's all, yeah. I didn't have any interest in it, really. But just offered to see me. I never could have earned a living at it, I don't think.
Did you ever want to earn a living as an artist?
I remember the first, I painted portraits for a while, just to make some money. And I never was good at it. It took me forever, so it was economically wasn't good. But I mean, I paid an income tax. I don't know this. I was, I might have been 30. And I paid an income tax. I was so proud. The first year I could needed to pay one.
Throughout your career, we've seen these figures in motion. What about motion? Is it a metaphor for something else to you?
Yes, it really is. So I made sketch, use it rather arbitrary, but it is a metaphor for me because of something that it seems to me characteristic of American life. And to illustrate what I mean, some of you must know Renoir quite well. And Renoir lived in a particular layer of French society, and he painted this there. And I'm thinking of, because I use this in my own mind as a Touchstone. He painted a young woman, it's called The Cup of Chocolate. And you see something in the environment, you know exactly who he is in the French world. In subtle ways, you know just who she is. The little napkin, everything. You know that her mother would be represented the same. Her grandmother would be represented the same. Her children would be represented the same. Not her grandchildren, I guess, on account of today's changes. But in America, this is not characteristic of America. That generations are settled into some portion, but they're always moving. It's characteristic of it. Now, these girls that I got interested in doing, who worked in the neighborhood of my studio, Union Square, and who came from the Bronx, usually, they struck me as being mobile in life, and I was interested in expressing mobility in the physical sense, which I wanted best to be mobility, not thinking of the social aspect, but I wanted mobility. Then, wanting mobility, I began to feel this in these people, in these girls, that they not only could they across the street, but they could cross the railroad track. And some of them took to touch with me for years. Now, I just thought, well, it seems to me true of America.
In the 1950s, in that tidal wave of abstract expressionism, the critical view did really not include what Isabel Bishop was trying to do. How did you sustain yourself during that period?
You mean abstract expressionism? Well, this is interesting because the critics really went overboard. That is, there was no discussion in any critical journal of anything but abstract expressionism. It took the whole theme and really worked. But I want to describe, I didn't have to know Rachel Sawyer. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. I had a card from him. This is about 1950. Postcard said, tomorrow you're going to meet at a restaurant.
Where did you meet, by the way?
Called Del Pesto. And would like to come. Well, I came, and there was Ben Shahn, Rachel Sawyer, Reginald Marsh, Hussein Kuniaki, Joe Salmon, well, a number.
Any other women?
I don't think there was any woman at that point. Anyway.
You didn't know most of these people. Sawyer just wrote this postcard.
Maybe had met them, but
no genuine relationship.
And Rachel didn't know them. He really didn't know them either. But he wrote this card because it was a time when figurative painters should come together and talk. And now this was we adored it, loved it. And Del Pesto put us out because we didn't print enough. But Ben Shahn, who was then enormously famous, had just been through the country lecturing at universities, and he was shocked because he found that in the university art departments, which were teeming with students, that the students didn't know anything. That is, they had no knowledge. They were ignorant. They never saw. They had no library slides. They weren't taught any art history. They were just being disciplined in one mode, abstract expressionism, and they became very good at it. Great many of them. But at the same time, they were ignorant, and in other words, they had no leverage on any change of style. They were just given this one way, and they had no leverage for any changes, which was a bad situation. So we spoke about that, this great deal of a feeling. And then, after quite a lot of meetings, during which at one point Kuniaki, Kuniaki said, he was a man of very few words. I spent whole evenings in his apartment where he never said anything at all, just his pipe. But he did take his pipe out, and he said, couldn't we just talk about art? We're artists together. And we've been talking about these things about education and the troubles about the critics. Couldn't we just talk about art? I thought it was lovely. Everybody really stopped in their tracks.
But did they start talking about art?
Oh, well, yes. He's an adorable man. But anyhow, we thought what to do, and we thought, well, we'd like to at least express ourselves. So we got together a little paper which was called, Henry Van Poor was one of the instigators of this also. And he wanted it called Reality. And I thought this, I always totally opposed to it, but nobody listened to me. Dr. Bean, who was one of the group, wanted it to be called From the Horse's Mouth, which was right. It should have been called From the Horse's Mouth. But it was called Reality, and we all together with a great deal of, and we got articles from Kokoska, from Berenson, from a good many distinguished people abroad, and a good many distinguished people here, and it made quite a stir. But only altogether over 4 years, this is 4 copies in 4 years. And these weren't sold, we sent them to universities and libraries and so on. And art magazines became absolutely furious. Well, long diatribes about these awful ideas, retrograde ideas. But anyhow, we did. But after 4 issues, we didn't see any use in going on. We all said what we had to say.
What do you think
but
of...
these are remembered now, and it's sort of collector's items.
What do you think of the level of art criticism today?
I don't think it's the best art. I think the art is better than the art criticism, thank you.
What role does criticism have?
Well, I think it could have, and that's the reason I feel rather badly about it. I think it could be very useful.
It can be very dangerous, too, and misleading to artists.
Well, it can be very misleading, and it has a great deal of power. It's a great deal of power. I don't know whether critics, whether you yourself realize how much power you have. A great deal.
Not I, but do you think that in the course of your own work, that the role of critics have influenced your work?
Oh, I haven't influenced my work.
But just your approach?
No. I don't think they've influenced it at all. I've been glad to have a pat on the back now and then.
Are there any artists whose work you most respond to currently?
Well, currently, I think one doesn't quite take that view of being. I don't feel that relation to current. When I go to see it, I want to see it, I want to know what's going on, and I feel very mad about it, but I don't feel. I mean, one looks at work in the past with the feeling of emulation. I don't think one looks at the work of the present with emulation. I mean, not that it isn't worth emulating, but because that isn't one's relation to it. Don't you see? I mean,
when you look at the work of the past, do you see it as emulation, or if you had it to do over again, would you do anything otherwise?
As investigation, always investigation. You find out things. You find out other things you haven't found out before. I don't mean information, but you find out from your experiences of it. I remember I found out that there were two half tones in Corot. I never thought about 2 half tones. I thought about a half tone, but not 2 half tones.
What do you mean 2 half tones?
Well, a dark half tone and a light half tone, and then I found that the dark half, in most instances, and not everyone, the dark half tone was nearer the dark than the light half tone was the light. See, well, things like that.
The dark half tone was near the dark. I think we follow that, and the light half tone was near the light.
Oh, the other way around. And the light was more pronounced as different from the light half tone. The dark half tone and the dark, and the dark half tone were nearer together, so they were distinct. I mean, things like that you look for.
What can we look forward to in the future in terms of your work? You recently mentioned that you must continue to work and continue to be experimental.
Well, I hope to.
What is the nature of the current experiment?
Well, that, I don't know how to talk it. You can talk a thing and not do it. You know?
Well, you are doing it. Can you give us some little idea of what?
Well, I don't think I better, because I do want to get on with it, and I feel I might dissipate my little effort talking about it.
How important is printing and etching to your work?
Well, it's important to me because I have a darnest time with my work anyway. And in order to come to an image that I could then work on in painting. I have to come at it, and lately I've been coming at it in a complicated way. One thing, you have a drawing, and a way of finding out if there's any, what I call idea in the drawing. An idea, by that I mean a visual idea, is to make an etching, because an etching is a more austere medium, and there's no kernel that came through in the effort to make an etching, then there wasn't any idea in it anyway. So then you get that far. Then in recent years, putting an applicant tone on that plate in order to, in a certain freedom, arrive at a tone which will be serendipitous, really. Because there's a lot of serendipity in aquatint. And you stop out, your hand does something maybe you wouldn't think of up here. Your hand does something. And you bite certain parts darker than you ever meant to bite something. And something can come out of that which is, that's an image I can really go after in painting. So it won't be the same thing because it'll be quite different in painting from what it was in black and white.
For a long time you said that figurative work was not only not seen, it was invisible.
It's invisible. Really, it's invisible. I don't think, but that's not true now, thank heaven. It really
How would you describe the current view of figurative work?
Every kind of thing is seeable now. That's most important.
Current diversity, plurality.
It's visible. There isn't any part of it that isn't visible, I think.
Thank you, Isabel Bishop, whose strength and work has shown the test of time. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us with such generosity and such clarity.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.